Welcome to WOW, the Woman of the Week podcast series from Pharma Voice. This week's episode has been made possible by a generous sponsorship from Calcium. For more information, visit calciumusa.com. In this episode, Taryn Grome, editor-in-chief of Pharma Voice magazine, visits with Patricia Malone, chief creative officer, Fresh Blood.
Patricia, welcome to the Pharma Voice WOW podcast program.
Thanks so much, Taryn. It's great to be here and part of this program.
So, Patricia, it's great to catch up with you again. I know that we connected, it's got to be going on 10 years ago or 12 years ago when you were at Stratagem. We'll get into that a little bit later, so I'm so happy to get reacquainted.
Absolutely, yes. You two have been in this industry, and it's such an important part of it, so it's really great to connect.
You know, I'm really intrigued by your background. I didn't know this, but you come from a critical care nursing background, and thrown into that background with English literature, a kind of an unusual combination. So talk to me about how that diverse background led you to where you are today as an agency entrepreneur and executive.
It's really interesting how you get where you get, but
yes.
The combination really did and still does help me balance many things in my career and my life, actually. As far as becoming an agency executive and how that's helped me throughout, starting new as a copywriter in New York, right from the start in my nursing career, I quickly learned really that triage, troubleshooting, and really understanding clear roles and responsibilities were, in our sort of agency term, critical success factors. And as I became more experienced in nursing and moved along that path, they were part of leading a critical care unit. And so throughout my career, they've sort of been foundational skills in working with people, and leading an agency. That combination of critical care nursing and English lit and creative writing helped me get in the door when I really had no experience in healthcare advertising or copywriting. I had done a lot of creative writing on my own. I loved creative. It was my best subject all through my academic life, but not ad writing or marketing communication. So I must add, too, that the other thing that helped me get in the door was truly my first boss. When we met, we really connected. She was amazing. She was open-minded enough, confident enough, and truly willing enough to take a risk to hire me and let me through that door. So lesson one that I've carried with me throughout my career is look for passion and potential, not necessarily senior experience or firsthand experience. Really, it's been important to see what you can help someone become. So that was very important. But once in the door, my background has served me well in a few ways. One, it helped me stay calm. No one's critically ill. As you know, agencies can be crazy. And when you're just starting in the business, or if it's a launch or some multiple work stream deadline, all-nighters happen. Or permission to enter as a newbie, and then late nights and weekends are just part of advertising. But coming from a critical care unit, there was a baseline that I was used to where there were true emergencies that took people's lives if you didn't do things right. So I would always remember that. That background really helped me stay calm, buckle down with teams, get the work done, rather than just stressing out and worrying about things that are truly beyond my control. When you live and breathe emergencies, agency emergencies are I'm not belittling them. They're there, but they're very, very different.
I think that's a great perspective. Especially as we live in this 24/7 life cycle, right? So
exactly.
That's a great perspective.
Exactly. And the 24/7 life cycle is really, you have to put boundaries around that too, right? So that's been a really interesting thing from an agency executive standpoint. But my background also, Taryn, it made me understand, and we all say this and know this and do this, but it is truly about teamwork. Again, in the critical care unit, I was in the CCU, we ran cardiac codes in teams and had each other's back. There's no one person who saves a life. It's a team. And I don't mean that in any kind of just a coarse way, but it takes a team. So that's my philosophy in leading creatives and leading an advertising agency. It's about teamwork. It's not necessarily about one person's idea, because ideas come from, people building on sparks or nuggets of thoughts, and finally a big idea might come from someone, but it's been a building process to get there. So it's the teamwork, sharing the load on those late nights and weekends, or unexpected deadlines. It's really having each other's back. So it really was the foundation of helping me understand the absolute importance of culture in an agency, and the need for team building versus team breaking down, or idea breaking down because it wasn't yours, or we can get it done together. So no matter what the hierarchy in an agency is, it is about teamwork. You don't go home because you're a senior position and leave teams working late into the night. You're kind of right there with them, and you get to the end together. Nursing also, this sounds weird. I think it sounds weird. But nursing taught me to be nice. I mean, you're always nice, but nice in times of real crisis. Nice and patient and understanding. They always say that about nurses, and you don't always come into it that way. Sometimes you really do learn it because you're put under different kinds of pressures that you need to kind of rise to the top and overcome. So I think you need to be nice in this business. I've had incredibly hard bosses from whom I've learned so much. And in the CCU, when I worked there, when I was new there, things are really stressful. And if you're an experienced charge nurse and all of a sudden this new graduate comes in and you're in a unit running a code and there's a new graduate in the room, it's very, very stressful. And yet my mentor, when I first started in the CCU, was so patient, so knowledgeable, so firm, but so nice and kind of right there with me, even in a crisis. She could be terse, but she gave, and here I go again, she gave clear orders and let me play a role that built my own confidence and clinical skills. She didn't put me over in a corner because I was new and didn't know anything. Wherever she could, she would allow me to feel like I had a role in it right from the outset. So that was true when I started at Sutherland Hennessy. The creative director I worked for, or the head creative director, used to immediately take out the red pen when I bring my copy in. It was called copy then, not content. But I think I would leave with maybe one line intact, and I would be heartbroken because I felt like I was in, first grade. But he wasn't mean. And I learned from what he crossed out and he literally had a red pen. I mean, we had computers, but he wanted the copy document, and he wanted to mark it up. But he'd also taught me to really care about every word, how they link together, the communication from an advertising standpoint. And he'd be the first one to sit down with me and painstakingly explain, how a sales aid needs to flow, why it needs to flow the way it does, how every word and every headline has to link together, what goes into a campaign, a strategy. So those are defining moments. They were always, I don't mean overly nice, but nice in how they brought me in and how they mentored me. And these are the defining moments truly that are engraved in my memory and that I carry through as I moved up into leadership positions. So throughout my career, I've worked with really great people who took the time, invested in me, wanted me to grow, because then everyone wins. So I've really tried to do that with those I've led and mentored, and that it does go back to the roots of start out being just nice, because these are people learning and wanting to learn. And, there are moments where you have to be firm and constructive criticism, and there are unpleasant moments as you move up into leadership roles, but I still believe in being nice.
Nice never hurts. Nice will get you everywhere. Nice never hurts.
That's right.
It's like what they say. What you learned in kindergarten, it still stays true. Be nice. Play nice in the sandbox.
It does. It's very true. And, you do run across people in your career, I'm sure you have, who just aren't necessarily nice. And you kind of think, why not? Why not be nice?
Right.
And I think more literally my clinical and nursing background with healthcare advertising. It's what kind of drove me into healthcare advertising, because I could understand the science. By being on the nursing sort of caring side of many of these categories and diseases I end up writing about, helped me really bring firsthand insight, not just market research insight, and emotion to the creative output, because you've kind of lived with some of these people and families through their suffering. So I could often, in concepting or in writing or working with teams, you could almost come up I could visualize actual patients and families, and that was a driving force to find solutions and shape the narrative. So my science and nursing background, helped me understand the mechanisms of therapies. It helped me when meeting with scientists and KOLs. And, of course, believe me, when you're just looking at target audiences, I'm the one raising my hand in the room saying, well, what about the PAs and nurses and NPs? They're more important now than ever, the fellows, So it was great. And, of course, writing-wise and creativity, I've always loved creativity. Like I was saying, English and creative writing were my best subjects, but I'd always been inspired by nurses and people, helping people in the hospitals, and I worked on an ambulance. So the combination, I think, of, the writing and nursing has really been a valuable one in many, many ways throughout my career.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. I think those are great perspectives and awesome insights. And it again, perfect lessons of being nice. And that doesn't mean that's not a weak character trait. It's a good character trait. It's something to be thought of positively.
Yeah, and I actually, just as a little side point on that, I remember having one boss who said to me, you're too nice. If I would listen to an account person or sort of consider something that maybe shouldn't have been considered from a creative standpoint. And it was actually very, very constructive criticism, because, he wasn't saying don't be nice, but I think it was more, be firm, move forward with what you believe in, do it nicely, of course, I guess. But I don't think you can be too nice, but you can't be wishy-washy, and you can't be, everybody's friend all the time either. But I do believe firmly that you can move up, be successful, and be nice.
Understood. I think you're absolutely right. You talked about being at Sadler and Hennessy, and then you moved to San Francisco. I'm curious, do you see that there's a difference between East Coast, West Coast in terms of creativity, in terms of the business and what the focus is on?
I do. I think there are definitely, it's changed over the years, but, today many of the healthcare agencies here in San Francisco are satellites of New York-based agencies. They come and go. There's 3, fairly large pharmaceutical companies, unlike New York where there's many. There's far fewer out here. There's the Amgens and Genentechs and Gilead, but not as many as New York. So there's satellites out here to service those. So creatively in those satellites, I don't think it's so different, except you really have to learn to bridge the gap to keep a tight connection with your mothership in New York. If you're working in a satellite, it can be a tendency to feel isolated, I think. So you really have to work harder to make a satellite West Coast agency feel to be an integral and important part of the larger agency. Talent has changed too. When I initially came here from New York, there was maybe 1 or 2 healthcare agencies in San Francisco. So it was really, really hard to get healthcare talent out here. Silicon Valley wasn't here. So people didn't want to pack up and risk moving to a 2-agency town because there's no place to go if it didn't work out. And it's a pretty significant move from New York to San Francisco. And New York always had the talent because there were so many agencies and large pharma companies there. But that's changed, and now there are many more agencies of all sizes, and especially more and more boutique agencies, because what's different in San Francisco, and this has been true for the past 2 decades really, are the number of startups, this entrepreneurial, biotech, health tech,
Sure.
and just more lately emerging femtech companies, which are really exciting, who are truly looking for a partner who can match their agility, their nimbleness, and need for greater efficiencies. So there's a lot less appetite out here, in my opinion, for bloated teams and slow-moving processes. When I did work in one of the satellites, you would sometimes maybe win a little piece of business, but it needed that agility and nimbleness, and it just wasn't always a good fit in a large agency layered process structure. So as you know, this is kind of a key niche for Fresh Blood. With these entrepreneurial life science companies, many times you're working directly with the C-suite to develop a foundational strategy. And in New York, I don't think I ever met anyone in the C-suite. You'd go to Merck, and I wouldn't meet C-suite people. You'd work with the brand managers and product managers. And also, I think what's a little bit different out here is many of the great agencies in New York specialize, and Philadelphia and Chicago, big agencies in general, specialize maybe in one category, like they become known as the oncology agency. So big oncology brands tend to look at them, and it's a real great thing for them because they can build a portfolio. But in working with the agencies here in San Francisco, and then as we talked a little bit, co-founding my own for 15 years, what I found is that the portfolios have to be more diverse. And they have a range of pharma, biotech, medical device, and consumer healthcare. And I actually really, really like that about the West Coast. It's incredibly refreshing from a leadership and especially from a creative standpoint.
Yes, I think when you talk about the diversity of the client mix, it brings a different perspective and draws a different cadre of talent as well, I would think.
That's right, exactly. And there are people, you might have an oncology molecule that you're working on, and then you do bring in an oncology writer, but then you might have a consumer healthcare, and that is a totally different kind of writer or creative, which can be really fun, even from a culture perspective. And then I think the other thing that's different is we are at the threshold or the doorstep of Silicon Valley and all that is happening there. So everybody benefits from that across the nation. South by Southwest is such a fascinating thing to go to, but to have conferences like Dreamforce at your doorstep is really inspiring. Just to see what's happening every day in the news, or going to these kinds of conferences in other worlds that more and more are becoming such a larger part of my world. Salesforce has become integral to all of our clients in many ways. And their Dreamforce is really inspiring. And it's right here. You don't have to travel. There's so much happening in Silicon Valley. So I think that makes it a little bit different. Sometimes you can get high-tech talent for some of the high-tech or femtech clients, and that's a really interesting mix, too, from an agency standpoint.
Excellent. You alluded to the fact that you had started an agency 15 or so years ago, and now that you're there at the precipice with Fresh Blood. What's the difference between starting Stratagem and being part of Fresh Blood now? What's changed in terms of starting up an agency?
Well, we know more. Definitely know more. Both Bob and I have enormous experience having worked on the front line, starting our own agencies, coming up through an agency, and then leaping out to start our separate agencies. So we both were agency owners, and truly you learned so much from your successes and definitely mistakes. So with Fresh Blood, we're going in more informed, more clear about who we are and want to be, and much more importantly, which I can't say was true when I started Stratagem, we are more clear about who we aren't, and I think that's really important. So our model is different than when we started our respective agencies, and our goals are different.
Very good. And how are they different?
Today, I think, as we all know, healthcare is rapidly evolving, and the clients want something different, I think, than they did 20 years ago when I started my agency. They want a wider range of services for less. And so you find, and it's in the news all the time and happening all over, that consultancies are building up creative capabilities. They acquire them, or they build them internally, while more traditional agencies are offering more consultative services. So we're focusing more on hybrid approach, a true hybrid approach in a more focused niche. So I believe there's truly a need for confluence of consultative and creative services. So when Bob started Fresh Blood in 2015, it began as a pure consultancy. Bob Finkel, who is the CEO of Fresh Blood, and it was helping emerging clients forge a strong strategic foundation on their road to commercialization. So it was working with C-suite more than brand and product managers. I mean, often it was really working with actual scientists who discovered or developed the product. And I remember when Bob started it, because he and I go way back in our careers. And because Fresh Blood worked closely with these core teams, strategy, when it came time to commercialize, what was happening was some of the larger clients were asking Fresh Blood to become their creative partner and to continue with them and help them execute on the strategy by creating full channel campaigns and moving through launch. So at that time, Fresh Blood had limited creative capabilities. So 2 years ago, due to this client demand, Fresh Blood restructured and expanded and formed the Fresh Blood Group. And at that time, 2 years ago, I came on board to help with this expansion of the creative services arm, bringing more capabilities and an arm with the creative expertise and real firepower to bring a unified strategy to life. So I think that's definitely where we're different, and certainly different from the agency that Bob started and the agency that I started prior to Fresh Blood. And today we offer our clients this full value chain from consultative to campaign. Or, they can tap into the parts of the value chain most relevant to their needs, which I think has really been a great benefit to our clients. We specifically focus on clinical stage entrepreneurial life science companies. We build bespoke teams, sort of an agile custom collection of experts, maybe you call it, to fit the needs of our clients. And then we support them in developing and perfecting the go-to-market strategy, their differentiated positioning, branding, and the creative campaign execution. So we're a true hybrid of market consultancy and creative ad agency.
Excellent. So where do you think the biggest opportunities are for agencies going forward?
I think a few places. I think there is an opportunity to continue. We've already started, agencies continue to hone in on reaching people in the most relevant places. That's what it's about, reaching people in the most relevant places. And the opportunity to not just create like this one campaign that's consistent in all channels, but really an opportunity to identify and change the message depending on how people consume information. The more predictive analytics and greater insights from tools such as AI, I believe, are driving new thinking and new strategies. And we continually look to find new ways to solve problems with all these tools and not just sell ideas. And I think that's a really important differentiation, and agencies have come to really want to solve problems. I think there's an opportunity to advance the agency model itself, as I was just kind of describing about Fresh Blood, but to continue to create these more dynamic and fluid structures. By doing that, you can become more agile and you can refresh more quickly for greater interest and relevance to your audiences. So I think it's really an opportunity for more purpose-built models that enable this scalability and agility, and agencies willing to decouple where it makes sense for clients, to give clients more efficient and effective integration with other companies that might bring complementary expertise in other areas that may not be part of your agency. So it's a real agile model and refreshing, I think. And I do come from the creative side, so I have to say this, because I really believe there's a huge opportunity for agencies to do even better creative work. It is still about ideas. It's how those ideas reach people that I think has advanced and become much more effective. But that basic idea, I still believe is so important. And there are more and more tools and metrics to help us find those deeper insights, which I think will drive us to push our creative boundaries. And I think there's always an opportunity in healthcare advertising and specifically pharmaceutical to push creative boundaries.
So it's really the art and science of creative, right? So if you're relying on those data insights, but then you need a human and to bring the art to those ideas. So how do you nourish creative talent in this age of data?
That's a good one because it is all about data. But to your point, creative talent are people. They are humans. They are learning and growing. And I think first and foremost, it's critical to create a safe place for creative talent, an environment where all ideas are welcome. We have a tendency, I think, the longer you're in this business to start editing right away because you know the FDA won't let you say this or the med legal, but it's really a place to throw out ideas in every channel. So I love starting a brand new creative off on a career journey because it's just really exciting to see them take off. And I think it's important to provide them with the tools they need right at the beginning, to give them the challenges, to build their confidence and creative curiosity. I think creativity is a muscle you have to stretch. So finding ways to keep creative curiosity within an agency, I think, is really nourishing to creatives. And then to put the time in required from them to learn. If they're new, haven't done it before, but you know they have creative capabilities, I think it's hard to find the time, but you build in structures that allow for creatives, new creatives, to have the people to teach them and mentor them. As I go back to those who, quote, nourished me, like we talked about earlier. They made me part of a process. You know, a new creative could be part of a presentation if there's a part, because it really builds confidence. I think the talent, really nourishing talent, needs a balance of mentoring, truly constructive criticism, feedback, goal setting, and most importantly, like I was saying before, this opportunity to feel safe and confident to really explore their creative potential. I think they need to see a vision for their own path, and this is true of non-creatives also. It's just talent in general. They have to see a vision for their own path and their future. And then together, to help nourish them, you put the stepping stones in place, you know, to help them get there. So
that's excellent. So, yep, that's great. You've outlined the path that you to help others become successful and recognize their success. How do you define success for yourself?
Personally, it sounds oversimplistic potentially, but if I inspire someone in any way, I feel I'm successful. If someone says, you inspired me to do this, I feel I've been successful. And that not only includes people at work, but my own family, circle, my friends. Career-wise, as an agency leader, I felt successful, if I inspired someone, including a client, for any reason, but successful if I can truly create a culture or company where people thrive, and I'm part of really building loyal and trusted relationships with our clients. Because if you can do that, I think it means you're doing good, smart work, and you're building really important relationships with not only internal agency teams, but your clients as well.
Fantastic. And finally, Patricia, you've had, obviously, a very successful career and a very diverse career. Can you identify one wow moment of your career that either changed the trajectory of your progression or made an indelible mark on yourself?
Okay, I'm going to be honest here. It was really my first big win as the owner of my own agency, Stratagem. It sounds a little self-serving. I should probably come up with something more humanistic. But it was truly the beginning of so much because my two partners and I had left the security of a large agency to see what we could do. and we were art, copy, and account. We had passion and drive, but we also knew sometimes that is just not enough, But through a connection, we were invited to a pitch. And we were a small and merry band going up against a couple of Goliath agencies, including the one we had left, which we didn't leave for any horrible reason. We just wanted to see what we could do, but we knew how big they were. So our win was really exciting because it truly gave us confidence that we can do this. And it was encouraging that really cool clients were willing to trust their brand with a more boutique shop. I think that was, even back then, that was, quite a long time ago now. But it helped me understand that smaller and more mighty and more nimble can win the day. And that's still true today. So it was one of those moments, that breakthrough from scrambling to find project work, where we were still really just creatives and account teams, to truly becoming an agency, implementing processes and building a structure and a culture. And it was also, for me, the beginning of learning the business side of it all. Coming from the creative side, you rarely worried about accounts payable or, profit loss. So it was really an important learning for me. So that win was a defining moment definitely in my trajectory.
I don't think that's self-serving at all. I think that's the entrepreneur story, and I think that's wonderful. And it sets you on a path to so much more. So I think it's a great wow. If you didn't get the first big win, you wouldn't have any other wins. So I think that's right. It's really important.
And it was just that critical confidence stage where if you didn't, you didn't necessarily go in thinking you were going to, because you were up against big agencies, but it was just that critical juncture. Are we going to make it, or are we not going to make it? And it was just a really important part of making it.
That's great. So I've so enjoyed speaking with you for our WOW podcast program. I want to wish you continued success, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Karen. It's great to reconnect with you again, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to this episode of WOW, the Woman of the Week podcast series. And thanks again to Calcium for sponsoring this episode. For more information, visit calciumusa.com. And don't forget to check out our other episodes at pharmavoice.com/wow. This 2019 program is copyrighted by PharmaLinks, LLC.